Ladies and gentlemen, how do?
After all the bravado about his Operation Midnight Dump, or Operation Midnight Hammered, in Pete Kegsbrith's case, or as his MAGA faithful like to call it, Midnight Hammer, it would appear that the illegal bombing of another sovereign country did not go quite as well as the numpty Trump brigade wants everyone to believe. Big Orange had all the usual suspects out there trotting out his bigly word of the day. Obliterated, everyone from Little Marco to Caroline Leave It Out, and the guyliner wearing couch-pounding king shady pants. The little Nosferatu creature Mr. Hate himself, Stephen Miller, must have given them all a cue card with it written on it and threatened them with a love bite if they didn't all repeat the word obliterated, even though the Bolshoi Barbie Leave It Out probably had to Google its meaning.
So Donald Trump and all of his MAGA minions, many of his MAGA minions, I guess I should say, have been lying to the country for days. They have lied to all of us over and over and over again.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated.
We have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program.
We are confident, yes, that Iran's nuclear sites were completely and totally obliterated.
Iran's nuclear program has been completely and totally obliterated. I feel like maybe they had a note card that said obliterated on it and they gave it to all those people and made them say it. Who knows? But that was the message from the Trump administration since Saturday night. Clearly, that's what they kept saying over and over and over again. Even, by the way, as top members of the military, including high-ranking people within this administration, were saying it was too early to make an assessment. Because it was too early to make an assessment. And now here are the headlines from this afternoon. Here's one from CNN. Early U.S. intel assessment suggests strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites. From the New York Times, strikes set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months, U.S. report says. That's according to an initial classified intelligence assessment, which reportedly found that the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, quote, did not collapse their underground buildings and set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. In fact, from all this reporting, a lot of it came out this afternoon, it turns out that much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strikes, which destroyed little of the nuclear material. In our own reporting, NBC News put an even finer point on it, saying, quote, an initial assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency concludes that the U.S. airstrikes conducted over the weekend on Iran's nuclear enrichment sites were not as effective as Donald Trump said.
Meanwhile, the US military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities did not destroy the country's nuclear program. That's according to a preliminary classified report cited by CNN and the New York Times. The report says the American strikes are only likely to set back the program by a few months, as Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strikes and therefore not destroyed. The findings oppose US President Donald Trump's repeated claims that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities. The White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt was revved up this morning, saying in a statement this alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous, low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration.
Maybe we can come back to those open-ended objectives in a moment, but if we just let's focus on the nuclear side of things for now. How confident are you that those facilities at Fordo, Natanz are, in the words of President Trump, obliterated?
Well, they're not obliterated. And I think one reflection of that is even at Fordo, the notorious site with the enrichment capabilities buried far underground, where we used the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, you know, the next day, Israeli aircraft went in to bomb Fordo again. So evidently, at least from the standpoint of Israeli targeteers and analysts, it wasn't obliterated. And I think even more importantly, there were numerous indications that the Iranians, expecting this kind of attack from the Americans, as well as from what they've sustained from the Israelis, had relocated much of their stockpile of partially enriched uranium and possibly some of the cascades of centrifuges as well. And that's part of what we and the IAEA, the International Monitoring Agency, simply don't know where that stuff is. But the bottom line is it's a dispersed, complex nuclear program, and you can't say that even if Fordo and Natanz, the facilities, were bombed into obliteration, that you've eliminated the program. The program is not eliminated.
Yeah, and there have been satellite images of trucks lined up at Fordo before that strike occurred. Right. Now, you are, of course, a former intelligence officer. Where do you rate missing weapons-grade uranium and centrifuges in Iran as a security risk? How serious is this?
Well, we've had a nuclear program in Iran that goes back to the time of the Shah. I mean, that's nothing new. We're not talking about some new crisis here. And all the intelligence indications, certainly that come out of the U.S. intelligence community, have been that Iran has still not decided to build a nuclear weapon or has initiated, or I should say resumed, because they were doing some of this stuff before 2003, weaponization or design of a weapon. What they've been doing ever since Mr. Trump pulled out of the previous nuclear agreement in 2018 is to increase this stockpile of up to 60%, which is kind of one level below what you need for weapons grade uranium. And so I don't consider that as a security risk per se. What I consider as a risk is if Iran were to be moved to actually make that decision finally to build a bomb. And I'm sorry to say that when you get attacked by a couple of other nuclear powers, it's hard to imagine any other thing that might move Iranian decision makers closer to that decision. That would be a threat.
And it was just yesterday that Trump announced that he had brokered a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. In fact, he was so confident in his negotiation skills that he told NBC News, quote, "I think the ceasefire is unlimited. It's going to go forever. I don't believe they will ever be shooting at each other again." But that statement had a shelf life of a few hours, because Israel and Iran started firing at each other overnight, just a few hours after he said that. Even Trump couldn't deny that reality. And the embarrassment that his ceasefire wasn't as forever as he had hoped, and all those big feelings, apparently, prompted him to drop an F-bomb on the White House lawn this morning.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Well, someone is a little cranky today, it seems.
Commander Bone Spurs flew out to the NATO summit in The Hague after his little hissy fit on the White House lawn, and while he was on board Air Force One, the draft dodger was more than happy to let reporters know all about his love-in on the phone with his bestie. Now that he and Elon are getting divorced, maybe Bone Spurs needed some of Vladdy's TLC. A nice golden shower followed by Vladdy drying him down, powdering his fat orange ass, and putting a nice clean diaper on him.
You know, I'd like to see a deal with Russia. As you know, Vladimir called me up. He said, "Can I help you with Iran?" I said, "No, I don't need help with Iran. I need help with you."
On arriving in The Hague, Big Chief Obliteration was given the VIP treatment and had his sphincter well and truly licked clean by NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be with a friend of mine.
The NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte is hosting Donald Trump in The Hague tonight. They get on well, but he might be very surprised to find the text messages he sent praising the president posted on social media. He wrote, "Mr. President, dear Donald, congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary, something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer."
And after spending the night on his Truth Social platform, proclaiming that he was the greatest deal maker and peacemaker in the history of the world ever, yada yada yada, he spent the next morning taking care of the really important business, having a spat with AOC on Twitter because she upset him by calling for him to be impeached.
Ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to be holding for now, while President Trump spends his night in the Netherlands for the NATO summit just hours after announcing that deal. But he spent his morning taking shots at Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as calls for his impeachment over striking Iran grow louder over on Capitol Hill. Today, Trump dared AOC and her Democratic friends to impeach him again, going full on Clint Eastwood, saying, "Make my day." AOC hit back, accusing the president of illegally bombing Iran and dragging the U.S. into war.
But we're going to begin with breaking news from the summit. As you might expect, U.S. President Donald Trump is right at the center of it. Trump is doubling down on his assertion that Iran's nuclear program was destroyed by U.S. military strikes on Sunday, and that is despite a leaked preliminary intelligence report that casts doubt on the U.S. success. The new assessment instead suggests Tehran's nuclear program was set back by only a few months.
If you look at the before and the after picture, everything above is burned black. I believe it was total obliteration. I believe they didn't have a chance to get anything out because we acted fast.
Trump also pushed back on the report from Air Force One last night, insisting the sites were hit, quote, perfectly. The U.S. president told the world on Saturday the sites had been completely and totally obliterated. And since then, members of his administration have used the same language. Now, Trump this morning says Israel's government is carrying out a separate assessment and that he's waiting for an update on it.
They landed precisely where they were supposed to. So it was a flawless mission.
Flawless.
Any assessment that tells you it was something otherwise is speculating with other motives. And we know that.
Meanwhile, back in the US, the repugnants are doing their best to avoid any scrutiny and accountability regarding the illegal massive Trump dump of bombs in Iran, delaying any committee and oversight meetings. Now a suspicious person might think that they have something to hide.
For as much as the White House is taking a victory lap in the public and in the media after Trump's strikes on Iran, they are much less interested in answering questions from members of Congress. No surprise. I mean, the administration was supposed to provide classified briefings for all members today on the strikes, but all of a sudden, that got postponed to later in the week. As you might expect, some Democratic leaders are not happy about it.
This last-minute postponement of our briefing is outrageous, it's evasive, it's derelict. They're bobbing and weaving and ducking. There is a legal obligation for the administration to inform Congress about precisely what is happening. What are they afraid of?
What are they afraid of? These type of briefings happen all the time. Maybe they're afraid of answering questions about headlines like these, about an initial intelligence assessment that contradicts basically a lot of their claims about what those strikes accomplished. Maybe there's other things. And the gang, you're part of the Gang of Eight, yep. Which is a group that has been briefed on intelligence matters by Democratic and Republican presidents for many, many years. Have you been briefed as the Gang of Eight, aside from this Friday briefing? And how have you felt about your engagement with the administration about the intelligence leading up to this and what there is to know post the strikes?
Well, I mean, this goes back to pre-strike, right? Yeah. Ordinarily, if the administration were abiding by the law or with custom or with anything else, they might have given us a little bit of heads up. And interestingly enough, my Republican counterpart on the Intelligence Committee, Rick Crawford, did get a phone call. I did not. I suspect that's probably because I'm a Democrat. So, you know, they have sort of weaponized the informing of Congress along partisan lines. Now, you would have thought perhaps that immediately after the strikes, they might have had a briefing so that we, whose constitutional duty is to approve war or make declarations of war. No, they did not do that. And in fact, we were to get briefed as a whole House and as a whole Senate this afternoon. They canceled that and postponed it to Friday. So Congress remains almost entirely in the dark on what is one of the most consequential foreign policy moves that the United States has made in a decade.
Now, one of the challenges here is that even if more of it was destroyed, and we'll see what we learn through public reporting over the coming days, you can't destroy the know-how. The Iranian parliament today cut off their relationship with the IAEA to the degree that there was a productive one. And there's been reporting that they may redouble their efforts on maybe a covert program, whatever it may be. What concerns do you have about what the Iranians could do from here.
So, I mean, put yourself in the shoes of Iranian, right? You tried the diplomatic route. You agreed to the JCPOA under Barack Obama, the Iran nuclear deal, right? And it was a tough negotiation, took forever. But it's the one thing, by the way, as we all know, the one thing that actually slowed the roll of the Iranians towards a nuclear weapon. You know, they shipped all of their uranium to Russia. They shut down the centrifuges. And then Donald Trump tears that up. Then, just a few weeks ago, when there are actual negotiations underway, the Israelis attack, followed by a U.S. attack. So if you're an Iranian regime guy, you say, wait a minute, we tried that diplomacy thing, and it just doesn't work. So what's your alternative? Your alternative is to look at North Korea, which developed a bomb in secret. And now, by the way, nobody's invading North Korea. Pakistan, India, all of these countries that developed weapons in secret. And you say to yourself, you know, the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons. What happened to them? The Libyans gave up their nuclear weapons. What happened to Muammar Gaddafi? So if you're an Iranian regime person, and this is my worry is not that there's going to be a military attack on our naval assets in Bahrain or on our airfield in Qatar. My worry is that the Iranians are going to be evidently behaving themselves beautifully for the next 6 months because they've taken the good stuff and they're going to do exactly what North Korea does. And we're going to learn whether this raid was a success when there's actually a nuclear weapons test in Iran. So, again, it's not military action against our people that really worries me right now. It is 6 or 7 months of the Iranians behaving themselves perfectly because they actually have taken the decision to develop a weapon.
There you go, folks. I have done my best to give you a detailed but concise breakdown of what the human Mr. Blobby, an American scam commander-in-chief, has been doing since he nearly caused World War III. Please give me your insights regarding Brigadier Bigley in the comments section below, and a Bigley shout out to the 2 Davies channel and the frolicker himself, Daily Blaze. And if you have not yet subscribed to these wonderful channels, then what is wrong with you?